Son abandons sick mother at airport and steals her house. 20 years later, he returns broken, and what she does leaves everyone in shock. Margaret Thompson's heart skipped a beat as she stood in the busy terminal of Boston International Airport on that cold December morning in 2004. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows on her son Robert's face as he checked their luggage at the counter. At 68, she hadn't expected to face heart surgery, but here she was, clutching her purse and trying to stay calm. "Mom, I've got this handled," Robert said, his executive demeanor perfectly matched by his tailored suit. "The specialist in Chicago is the best in the country. You'll be fine." Margaret nodded, watching her only son work his magic with the airline staff. She'd raised him alone after losing her husband in a car accident when Robert was just 5. Now, at 35, he was a successful financial director, and she couldn't have been prouder. 3 days ago, when her doctor had delivered the news about her heart condition, Robert had immediately stepped in. "I'm taking you to Chicago," he'd declared, already making calls on his cell phone. "They have this amazing cardiac center there." "The coffee shop is still open," Robert said, pointing to a small store down the terminal. "I'll grab us something for the wait. Don't leave the check-in line, okay?" Margaret watched him walk away, his expensive shoes clicking against the marble floor. She'd given him those shoes last Christmas, spending a month's worth of her teacher's pension on them. The memory brought a smile to her face, despite the anxiety about her upcoming surgery. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Margaret shifted her weight from one foot to the other, her arthritis making standing uncomfortable. The line moved forward and she glanced nervously at the coffee shop. No sign of Robert. After 45 minutes, she reached the counter. The young woman behind it looked at her computer screen with a frown. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I don't see any reservation under Thompson for Chicago." "There must be some mistake," Margaret said, her voice trembling. "My son Robert was just here checking our luggage." "No luggage has been checked under your name, ma'am." Margaret's hands shook as she opened her purse, looking for her phone to call Robert. Instead, she found a typed note. "I can't take care of you anymore. The money from selling the house will be better invested in my business. Don't try to find me." The world spun around her. "My house?" she whispered, grabbing the counter for support. "What house?" "Ma'am, are you all right?" The airline employee's voice seemed to come from far away. Margaret's legs gave out, and she slumped against the counter. People gathered around her as she sank to the floor. Through her tears, she saw airport security approaching, their radios crackling with calls for medical assistance. "He sold my house," she kept repeating. The note crumpled in her shaking hands. "My home of 40 years. Later, in the airport's medical office, the truth emerged like a nightmare. Robert had used a power of attorney she'd signed months ago, just in case something happens during surgery, Mom, to sell her house. He'd planned this, carefully and methodically, timing it with her heart diagnosis. The young airport doctor kept checking her blood pressure, concerned about her heart condition. "Is there someone we can call?" he asked gently. Margaret thought of her neighbor Dorothy, who had just brought her soup last week when she'd caught a cold. Dorothy would help. Dorothy would understand. As she waited for her friend to arrive, Margaret sat in the cold medical office, still wearing the blue coat Robert had given her last Christmas. Outside, planes took off into the gray December sky, carrying people to their destinations, their families, their homes. But Margaret had nowhere to go. Her son had taken everything, her home, her security, and worst of all, her trust in the one person she'd given everything to protect and nurture. The intercom announced another departure to Chicago. Margaret closed her eyes, tears rolling down her cheeks, as the reality of her situation sank in. She wasn't going to any specialist. There was no treatment plan. There was only betrayal, cruel and calculated, executed in the cold light of a December morning by the son she had raised alone, the son she had sacrificed everything for, the son who had just proved that 40 years of love meant nothing against the allure of money. Dorothy Wilson drove to the airport as fast as she legally could when she got the call. She found Margaret in the medical office, still clutching that terrible note in her hands. "Let's get you out of here," Dorothy said, helping her friend up. 20 years of being neighbors had taught her when Margaret needed action more than words. The drive home was silent until Margaret suddenly spoke up. "I can't go home, can I? There's no home to go to anymore." Dorothy gripped the steering wheel tighter. "You're staying with me. We'll figure this out." The next morning, they sat at Dorothy's kitchen table while Margaret made phone calls. Each one revealed a new layer of Robert's betrayal. The house had been sold 2 weeks ago. The new owners would take possession in January. The bank confirmed that Robert had withdrawn all the money from the joint account he'd convinced her to create for emergency medical expenses. "I need a lawyer," Margaret said, her voice hollow. They found one through their church, a pro bono attorney named Michael Green who specialized in elder law. His office was small, but his anger at the situation was huge. "This is elder abuse and fraud," he explained, reviewing the power of attorney document. "But I have to be honest, these cases are tough. Robert used legal documents, even if he obtained them through deception. He covered his tracks well." Margaret stared out the office window. "He learned about finances watching me budget every penny to raise him. Now he's used that knowledge to take everything." The local police were sympathetic but unhelpful. "It's a civil matter," they explained. Without proof that Robert had explicitly stated his intentions to defraud, they couldn't pursue criminal charges. Word spread through their neighborhood. Margaret had taught at the local elementary school for 30 years before retiring. Former students, now adults with their own children, stopped by Dorothy's house bringing food and offers of help. Sarah, from their church group, organized a meeting. "We need to help Margaret fight this," she declared to the dozen women gathered in Dorothy's living room. "She's helped all of us over the years." But Margaret's health couldn't wait for legal battles. Her heart condition was worsening. The local hospital agreed to take her case, but without insurance, another casualty of Robert's actions, the costs would be astronomical. "I've started a fundraiser at church," Dorothy told Margaret that evening. "People want to help." Margaret shook her head. "I never thought I'd need charity. I worked hard all my life, put Robert through college, paid off my house, did everything right." That night, unable to sleep, Margaret went through the few boxes of belongings she'd managed to pack before learning about the house sale. She found Robert's baby book, filled with her careful notes about his first steps, first words, first day of school. The last entry was from his college graduation. "So proud of my son. All the sacrifices were worth it." A photo slipped from between the pages. Robert at 5, shortly after his father's death, holding on to Margaret's hand as they left the funeral. She'd promised him that day that she'd always take care of him, that they'd face everything together. "You were just waiting for the right moment," she whispered to the photo. "When I got sick, you saw your chance." Dorothy found her friend crying over the photo album at 3 a.m. Without a word, she made them both tea and sat with Margaret until sunrise. The next day brought more neighbors with offers of spare rooms, but Margaret stayed with Dorothy. "You need someone to keep an eye on your heart," Dorothy insisted. "And I need someone to help me with my crossword puzzles." They fell into a routine. Margaret learned to sleep in a strange bed, to live out of boxes, to accept help from people she'd once helped. Each day brought new revelations about Robert's planning. How he'd redirected her mail months ago, how he'd told neighbors she was selling the house to move closer to him, how he'd systematically dismantled her life while pretending to protect it. But each day also brought reminders that she wasn't alone. Her former students raised money. Church members brought meals. Dorothy turned her guest room into Margaret's room, insisting she stay as long as needed. "We're going to get through this," Dorothy promised over their evening tea. "You spent your life taking care of others. Now it's time to let others take care of you." Margaret nodded, touching her chest where her heart fluttered. She had lost her son and her home, but she was finding something else, a different kind of family, built not on blood but on love, not on obligation but on choice. The emergency room at Boston General was crowded when Margaret's chest pain became unbearable. Dorothy sat beside her in the waiting area, filling out endless forms. "Insurance?" the intake nurse asked. "Complicated situation," Dorothy replied, squeezing Margaret's hand. "We'll need to speak with your social worker." The wait lasted 4 hours. Margaret's heart condition was worsening, but without insurance or the ability to pay up front, they could only handle immediate emergencies. Mrs. Thompson? A young social worker named Linda Martinez appeared with a clipboard. "Let's see what we can do about your situation." Linda listened to their story, taking detailed notes. "This is more common than you'd think," she said. "We can get you emergency Medicaid coverage, but it'll take time. Right now, let's focus on your heart." The doctors didn't sugarcoat it. Margaret needed surgery within the month. The cost? Over $200,000. "I should have known something was wrong," Margaret told Dorothy later that night. Robert kept postponing the Chicago appointment, saying the specialist was booked. He was just waiting for the house sale to close. Church members took turns driving Margaret to medical appointments. Sarah organized a meal train. Dorothy's guest room became command central for Operation Help Margaret, as the ladies from church called it. Linda, the social worker, became their champion at the hospital. She found a cardiac program for uninsured patients and helped navigate the complex paperwork for emergency benefits. "You're not alone in this," Linda assured Margaret. "I see elderly parents abandoned by their children more often than you'd think. But I also see communities coming together to help." The hospital's cardiac wing had a support group for heart patients. During one session, Margaret met Helen, whose daughter had taken her retirement savings and disappeared to Florida. "How do you deal with the betrayal?" Margaret asked her. "One day at a time," Helen replied, "and I remind myself that their actions say more about them than about us." More stories emerged from the group. Children taking advantage of sick parents, families fractured by greed, but also stories of recovery, of finding new purpose, of building chosen families. Margaret's surgery was scheduled for February. The hospital agreed to a payment plan, and the church fundraiser had gathered enough for the initial costs. "We found more cases like yours," Linda told her during a pre-surgery consultation. "The police are starting to look at it as a pattern. They're building a task force for elder financial abuse." But Margaret couldn't focus on justice yet. Her heart needed fixing first. The night before surgery, she lay in the hospital bed while Dorothy arranged her things. "I keep thinking about Robert," Margaret confessed. "What if something happens during surgery? He won't even know." "Stop that right now," Dorothy said firmly. "You're not going anywhere. You have too many people counting on you." The surgery lasted 6 hours. Dorothy, Sarah, and 5 other church ladies took turns in the waiting room. When the doctor finally emerged, his smile said everything. "Your heart's stronger than you think," he told Margaret later in recovery. The cardiac ward became her temporary home. Church members visited daily. Former students sent cards. The support group members checked on her progress. Even the hospital staff grew attached to the quiet woman who always had a kind word despite her circumstances. Recovery was slow but steady. Physical therapy taught her to trust her healing heart. The support group helped her heal her emotional wounds. "You know what I realized?" she told Dorothy during a slow walk down the hospital corridor. "Robert took my house and my savings, but he gave me something too. He showed me who my real family is." Linda visited with more news. Other elderly parents had come forward with similar stories. The police were investigating multiple cases. Support groups were forming across the city. "Sometimes it takes one person's story to help others speak up," Linda said. By March, Margaret was strong enough to leave the hospital. Her new benefits would cover cardiac rehabilitation. The payment plan was manageable with her pension and the church's help. "Ready to go home?" Dorothy asked, pushing the wheelchair toward her car. "I am home," Margaret replied. "Home is where people love you. Robert taught me that too, just not the way he intended." As they drove away from the hospital, Margaret touched her healing chest. Her heart was different now, surgically repaired and emotionally stronger. She had lost a son but gained a community. It wasn't the life she'd planned, but it was the life she'd been given. And somehow, that was enough. Spring 2008 brought changes to the community center on Pine Street. Margaret sat in the back of the crafts room, watching seniors file in for her first art class. She hadn't planned on teaching again, but life had other ideas. "You're good with people," Clara Wilson, the center's social worker, had told her. "We need someone who understands what our seniors are going through. Clara wasn't like other social workers Margaret had met. She spoke directly and fought for her clients with a determination that reminded Margaret of herself in her teaching days. Just try one class, Clara had insisted. See how it goes. The first session was simple, teaching basic knitting to a group of 5 elderly women. But as their hands worked with yarn, their stories spilled out. Stories of loneliness, of family troubles, of fears about the future. My son hasn't called in 3 years, one woman confided while struggling with a pearl stitch. My daughter moved to California, says she's too busy to visit, another shared. Margaret listened, teaching them to create something beautiful while they shared their pain. By the 3rd week, the class had doubled in size. You're doing more than teaching crafts, Clara observed. You're giving them a space to heal. But not everyone supported the program. James Morton, a city councilman known for cutting senior services, questioned the center's budget during a board meeting. We need to focus on youth programs, he argued. These craft classes are a waste of resources. Margaret attended the next council meeting. She hadn't spoken in public since testifying about Robert's fraud, but this was different. This was about more than her. These aren't just craft classes, she told the council. They're lifelines. When you've lost your family, either through death or abandonment, you need somewhere to belong. The local newspaper covered the meeting. The reporter, a young woman named Sarah Chen, stayed afterward to ask questions. How did you go from being a victim of elder abuse to advocating for seniors? Sarah asked. I stopped being a victim the day I started helping others, Margaret replied. And the following Sunday, former teacher builds new family through community service, the headline read. The phone at the community center didn't stop ringing. We need more classes, Clara said. And not just crafts. These seniors need practical help, legal advice, financial planning, emotional support. Margaret's apartment above the center became an unofficial office. She worked with Clara to develop programs. Former students, now lawyers and accountants, volunteered their services. You have a gift for organization, Clara told her one evening as they reviewed applications for a new support group. You should be running this place. But the center's administration was hesitant. Margaret was just a volunteer, they said. She had no formal social work training. Then the grant money came. A local foundation, impressed by Sarah Chen's article, wanted to fund senior support programs. They specifically requested Margaret to oversee the project. They've seen what you can do, Clara said, waving the offer letter. You've turned craft classes into therapy sessions and knitting circles into support groups. The center's director called a meeting. Margaret sat quietly as they discussed her role. Some board members supported her. Others, friends of Councilman Morton, opposed giving her any official position. I just want to help, Margaret said when they finally asked her opinion. I've been where many of these seniors are. I know what they need. The vote was close, but Margaret got the job. Program director, they called it. She didn't care about the title. She cared about the work. That evening, she sat in her apartment, looking at the center's courtyard below. Seniors gathered there daily, sharing stories, playing cards, building the connections they'd lost elsewhere. You did this, Clara said, bringing her usual evening coffee. You turned your pain into purpose. Margaret smiled, touching the scar on her chest from her heart surgery. When Robert left me at that airport, I thought he'd taken everything, but he actually gave me a gift. He showed me what other abandoned parents need, someone who understands. The phone rang. Another senior needed help, another family situation, another chance to turn pain into healing. Margaret picked up the receiver, ready to listen, ready to help, ready to continue building this new family she'd found, one broken heart at a time. The community center's expansion plans hit their first snag in early 2012. Margaret sat in the city council meeting, listening to Councilman James Morton's objections. This proposal would triple their budget, Morton said, waving the documents. In these economic times, we can't justify this expense for a seniors program. Margaret had expected opposition, but not this level of hostility. The center had outgrown its space. Seniors were on waiting lists for programs. They needed this expansion. Sarah Chen, the newspaper reporter who'd been following Margaret's work, scribbled notes in the back row. She'd become a regular presence at these meetings, documenting the growing conflict between Morton and the center. "Mrs. Thompson," Morton called out, "can you explain why taxpayers should fund your personal crusade?" The room fell silent. Margaret stood, remembering all the seniors who'd shared their stories of abandonment and loss. "This isn't a personal crusade, Councilman. Last year, we helped 300 seniors avoid financial fraud. We prevented 20 cases of elder abuse. We provided support services that saved the city money in emergency care and social services." Morton wasn't convinced. The next day, city inspectors showed up at the center. They found minor code violations that had never been an issue before. "He's trying to shut us down," Clara said, watching the inspectors take photos. "But why?" Sarah Chen had an idea. She'd been investigating Morton's voting record on senior issues. "There's a pattern here," she told Margaret during their weekly coffee meeting. "Every time the center expands its services, Morton opposes it. I think there's more to this story." The truth emerged through public records and Sarah's persistent reporting. Morton's biggest campaign donors owned private nursing homes. The center's free services were cutting into their profits. "We need to go public with this," Sarah said, showing Margaret her draft article. "The people need to know." The story broke on a Sunday. By Monday, Morton's office was flooded with calls. Seniors and their families shared stories about the center's impact. Local business owners stepped forward with donations. "This is bigger than Morton now," Clara said, watching the news coverage. "People are finally talking about senior care in this city." Morton demanded a public hearing. The council chambers were packed. Seniors from the center filled the front rows, wearing buttons that read, "Family isn't always blood." One by one, they testified. A retired teacher who'd almost lost his pension to scammers until the center's legal clinic stepped in. A widow who found purpose again in Margaret's art classes. A former executive who now volunteered helping others avoid the financial traps he'd fallen into. Margaret spoke last. "When my son abandoned me at the airport 8 years ago, I thought I was alone. This center proved me wrong. We're not asking for charity. We're asking for the chance to help more people find their way home." The vote was unanimous. Even Morton raised his hand. The expansion would proceed. After the meeting, Morton approached Margaret. "You've got quite a following," he said, trying to sound casual. "Maybe we can work together on this." Margaret studied the man who'd tried to destroy her work. "We'd welcome your support, Councilman. The seniors of this city need all the advocates they can get." That evening, Margaret sat in her office, looking at the expansion plans. The new wing would house a legal clinic, financial counseling center, and more classroom space. Sarah stopped by with the next day's paper. The headline read, "Council approves senior center expansion. Morton pledges support." "You know what this means?" Sarah asked. "You've changed the conversation in this city. Senior care isn't just a charity anymore. It's a right." Clara brought in their evening coffee. "Morton's already calling about photo ops at the groundbreaking. Should we let him?" Margaret smiled. "Of course. This was never about winning or losing. It's about helping people find their way back to family, whatever form that takes." The phone rang. Another senior needed help. Another family in crisis. Another chance to turn pain into purpose. Margaret picked up the receiver, ready for whatever came next. The center was growing, just like the family it had created, one heart at a time. The Thompson Center for Senior Support opened its doors on a bright morning in 2016. Margaret stood at the entrance, watching the crowd gather for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. The new building seemed a world away from those first craft classes 8 years ago. "Quite a change from the old community center," Clara said, adjusting the welcome banner. Their staff had grown to 15, mostly women who'd started as volunteers. Sarah Chen arrived early, camera crew in tow. "Channel 5 wants to do a feature," she explained. "Senior abandonment is becoming a national issue. You're ahead of the curve." The ceremony drew hundreds. Councilman Morton stood nearby, enjoying his role as the center's newfound champion. But Margaret's attention was on the seniors arriving in groups, many of them from her original classes. "Ready for your speech?" Dorothy asked. After 12 years as Margaret's best friend and supporter, she now served as the center's administrative director. Margaret nodded, touching the familiar scar on her chest. Her heart condition was stable now, but the memory of that airport morning still lived in that scar. The center's programs had expanded beyond their initial scope. They now offered legal clinics, financial counseling, health services, and social activities. The waiting list kept growing. Victoria Adams, a local business owner, approached Margaret after the ceremony. "I've been watching your work," she said. "You've built something remarkable here. I'd like to help it grow." Victoria had made her fortune in real estate, but was known for her philanthropy. She understood what Margaret was trying to build. "These seniors need more than services," Victoria said. "They need purpose. You're giving them that." Later that afternoon, as the celebration continued, Margaret's assistant brought in a letter that would change everything. "Dear Mrs. Thompson," it began. "You don't know me, but I'm your granddaughter, Ashley. I'm 20 years old, and I've been trying to find the right way to contact you." Margaret sat in her office, hands shaking as she read. Ashley explained that she'd seen the news coverage of the center. She'd grown up hearing her father's version of events, but something hadn't felt right. "I found the truth," Ashley wrote, "about what Dad did to you, about the house, the money, everything. I want you to know that I'm sorry, and I want to know my grandmother." Clara found Margaret staring at the letter. "Bad news? I don't know," Margaret replied. "Robert has a daughter. She wants to meet me." The news spread quickly through their tight-knit staff. Dorothy was protective. What if Robert put her up to this? Sarah Chen offered to investigate. "I can look into her background, make sure this is legitimate." But Victoria Adams had practical advice. "Meet her in a public place. Hear her out. You've spent years helping others rebuild their families. Maybe it's time for your own healing." Margaret kept reading the letter. Ashley was studying social work in college. She'd done an internship at a senior center in California. "Your work inspired me," she wrote, "even before I knew you were my grandmother." That evening, after everyone had left, Margaret sat in the center's garden. The place had grown so much, helping hundreds of seniors find new purpose and family. "What would you do?" she asked Dorothy, who'd stayed late to talk. "You've always said family isn't just blood," Dorothy replied. "Maybe it's time to see if blood can become family too." Margaret drafted and redrafted her response to Ashley. Finally, she kept it simple. "Dear Ashley, thank you for your letter. I'd like to meet you too." The phone rang. Another crisis, another senior needing help. Margaret picked up, listening to a story of family breakdown and betrayal. She knew what to say now, knew how to help people rebuild their lives. She'd done it herself. After the call, she looked at Ashley's letter again. Somewhere in California, her granddaughter was waiting for a response. Margaret had built a family here at the center, created a home for hundreds of abandoned parents. Maybe it was time to see if her own family could heal too. "One step at a time," she whispered, sealing the envelope. Just like she told everyone who came to the center looking for help. One step, one day, one heart at a time. The center would still be here tomorrow, helping others find their way home. Tonight, Margaret Thompson was taking the first step on her own journey back to family. March 2020 hit the Thompson Center like a tidal wave. Margaret stood in the empty main hall, surrounded by signs announcing program suspensions due to COVID-19. Their seniors were the highest risk population, and they couldn't take chances. "We need to adapt," Clara said during their emergency staff meeting, conducted via Zoom. "Our seniors need us now more than ever." The isolation was devastating for their community. Many lived alone, and the center had been their only social connection. Phone calls poured in from seniors struggling with loneliness and fear. "What about online programs?" Victoria Adams suggested. She joined their board last year and now proved invaluable in crisis management. "We could teach them to use technology." Within a week, they'd launched Thompson Center Connected. Staff members delivered tablets to seniors' homes, teaching them through Windows how to join virtual meetings. The learning curve was steep, but determination won out. "I never thought I'd be running craft classes on a computer," Margaret told Dorothy during their daily check-in call. "But seeing their faces light up when they connect, it's worth every technical glitch." The pandemic created new challenges. Some seniors couldn't get groceries or medications. Others faced financial hardship as their part-time jobs disappeared. Many reported increasing pressure from family members seeking money or housing. Victoria stepped up again. "We need a meal delivery program," she declared, writing a check that made it possible, and a hardship fund for emergencies. Their staff worked remotely, but the mission expanded. They delivered meals, arranged medication pickups, and provided virtual companionship to isolated seniors. The center's phones rang constantly with calls for help. "Mrs. Thompson?" a volunteer called one evening. "There's a rumor going around about Robert." Margaret paused in her work. She hadn't heard from Ashley in months. The pandemic had disrupted their planned meeting. "What about Robert?" "Someone said he's back in Boston, lost everything in California." The news didn't surprise her. Sarah Chen had been tracking Robert's business dealings for years, reporting occasional updates. His investment firm had faced investigations. Now, apparently, it had collapsed. "Focus on what we can control," Clara advised when Margaret shared the news. "We have seniors counting on us." The center's reputation grew during the crisis. Other organizations sought their advice on serving seniors during lockdown. National media covered their innovative programs. Donations increased as people recognized the importance of supporting isolated elderly. "We're reaching more seniors than ever," Dorothy reported during a virtual board meeting. "Our online programs have no space limitations. We're helping people across the state." But the work took its toll. Staff members worked long hours. Margaret conducted support groups from her home office, listening to stories of fear and isolation that hit close to home. Victoria noticed Margaret's exhaustion during a video call. "You've built something extraordinary," she said. "But you need to pace yourself. This crisis isn't ending anytime soon." Then came the news about their funding. Government budget cuts threatened their programs just as demand peaked. The staff offered to work without pay to keep services running. "No," Margaret decided. "We'll find another way." Victoria organized an emergency fundraising campaign. The community responded overwhelmingly. Local businesses donated supplies. Volunteers stepped forward. Former clients contributed what they could. "This is what family does," one senior told Margaret during a virtual craft class. "You were there for us. Now we're here for you." By December 2020, the Thompson Center had become a model for senior support during crisis. They'd not only survived but grown, reaching isolated seniors who'd never found them before. The phone rang. Another senior in crisis, another family conflict, another chance to help. Margaret answered, ready to listen, ready to help, ready to continue the work that had given her life new purpose. Later, checking her email, she found a message from Ashley. "Grandma, I heard Dad's back in Boston. I'm worried about him, but I'm more worried about how this affects you. Are you okay?" Margaret touched her heart, feeling the old scar. She was more than okay. She was stronger than ever, surrounded by the family she'd built, doing work that mattered. One day at a time, she wrote back to Ashley. That's how they'd gotten through this year. That's how they'd face whatever came next. The new wing of the Thompson Center buzzed with excitement on its opening day in 2024. Margaret stood at the podium, preparing to address the crowd. 20 years had passed since that December morning at the airport. She was different now, stronger. "Mrs. Thompson?" Her assistant touched her arm. "There's a young woman asking to see you, says it's important." Margaret turned and found herself looking into familiar eyes, her own eyes, in a younger face. The world seemed to stop. "I'm Ashley," the young woman said. "Your granddaughter. We've been emailing, but..." She twisted her hands nervously. "I'm sorry for coming unannounced, but Dad needs help." The ceremony forgotten, Margaret led Ashley to her office. Clara followed, protective as always. "He lost everything," Ashley explained. "The investment firm collapsed. There were investigations, fines. He's been staying at a shelter downtown." Margaret sat quietly, processing the information. Robert was here in Boston, homeless. The irony wasn't lost on her. "He's in the lotted quietly. He doesn't know I'm telling you this. He's been watching the center's work for months, too ashamed to come in." Clara spoke first. "Margaret, you don't owe him anything." But Margaret was already standing. "Where?" The main lobby fell silent as Margaret walked in, and there he was, Robert Thompson, 20 years older, wearing worn clothes, his hair gray. He stood by the donor wall, staring at her name. When he turned and saw her, he froze. His legs seemed to give way, and he grabbed a nearby chair for support. The confident executive was gone, replaced by a broken man. The crowd noticed something happening. Dorothy appeared at Margaret's side. Victoria Adams stepped closer. Sarah Chen, there to cover the ceremony, reached for her notebook. "Hello, Robert," Margaret said, her voice carrying in the quiet room. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Tears filled his eyes. "The shelter sent me," he finally managed. "They said you might be able to help." The irony of those words hung in the air. 20 years ago, he'd abandoned his mother when she needed help. Now he stood before her, needing the very thing he'd denied her. Staff members watched tensely. Many knew the story. It was part of the center's origin. Some looked angry, others curious. "Our new wing includes a job training program," Margaret said clearly, "and counseling services. We start people at 8 a.m. sharp." Ashley stepped forward, standing between her father and grandmother. "Dad, this is my internship site. I've been working with Grandma's team for the past month, learning from them." Robert looked at his daughter in shock, then back at Margaret. "I didn't know," he whispered. "There's a lot you don't know," Margaret replied. "About family, about responsibility, about what happens to parents when their children abandon them." The ceremony crowd had gathered now, watching the scene unfold. Councilman Morton stepped forward, recognizing Robert from old news coverage. "Mrs. Thompson," he said quietly, "should we call security?" Margaret shook her head. "The Thompson Center helps people rebuild their lives. All people." She turned to Robert. "You can start tomorrow. Same rules as everyone else. No special treatment." He nodded, unable to speak. "And Robert?" She waited until he met her eyes. "Don't be late. We don't wait for people who don't show up." The message was clear to everyone who knew their story. 20 years ago, he hadn't waited for her at the airport. Now he would learn the value of showing up. Ashley hugged Margaret impulsively. "Thank you," she whispered. The ceremony proceeded, but the energy had shifted. Margaret's speech about second chances and rebuilding families carried new weight. The audience watched Robert sitting in the back row, witnessing the empire of compassion his cruelty had inadvertently inspired. Later, in her office, Dorothy asked the question everyone wanted to ask. "Are you sure about this?" Margaret touched her heart, feeling the familiar scar. 20 years ago, I learned that family isn't always blood. Now it's Robert's turn to learn that lesson. The phone rang. Another senior needing help, another chance to make a difference. Life at the Thompson Center went on, one heart at a time. Sarah Chen's investigation into Robert's downfall appeared in Sunday's paper. Margaret read it at her desk, each detail confirming what Ashley had already shared in their private conversations. The investment firm's collapse wasn't sudden. It started with small frauds, manipulated numbers, hidden losses. Then bigger lies. By the end, Robert had lost everything. His company, his reputation, and his family. His ex-wife Nancy caught him forging documents, Ashley explained during their lunch meeting. Just like he did with your power of attorney, she turned him in to the authorities. The story painted a clear picture. After abandoning Margaret, Robert had moved to California, using her house money to start his firm. Success came quickly, but it was built on deception. He got greedy, Ashley continued. Mom tried to warn him. She saw the signs, late nights, secret phone calls, hidden files, but he wouldn't listen. The investigation took 3 years. When it ended, Robert faced massive fines and civil lawsuits. Nancy filed for divorce. Their house was sold to pay debts. Ashley had to take student loans to stay in college. Clara knocked on Margaret's office door. "The staff is talking. They're worried about having him here." They had reason to be concerned. The center helped victims of financial abuse. Now they were employing someone who had committed it. Victoria Adams called an emergency board meeting. "We need to address this," she said via video link. "The media is asking questions. Our donors are concerned." Margaret listened as board members debated. Some wanted to rescind the job offer. Others saw it as a chance to demonstrate their mission of rehabilitation. "What do you think?" Victoria asked Margaret. "You're the one he hurt the most." Before she could answer, Dorothy burst in. "Robert's here. There's a situation in the lobby." They found him surrounded by angry seniors, former clients who'd read the newspaper article. One woman was in tears, pointing at him. "You're just like my son," she shouted. "He took everything from me too." Robert stood there, taking it. His shoulders slumped, his eyes on the floor. The confident executive was truly gone. "Enough," Margaret's voice cut through the chaos. Everyone in the meeting room, now. The seniors respected Margaret too much to refuse. Soon they sat in a circle, Margaret's usual support group setup. Robert took the last empty chair. "You want to know who Robert is?" Margaret asked the group. "He's every child who chose money over family. Every person who saw vulnerability as an opportunity. He's why this center exists." Robert flinched at her words. "But he's also something else now," she continued. "He's what happens when those choices catch up with you, when you lose everything and realize what really matters." The room was silent. "This center helps people rebuild their lives," Margaret said. "All people, even those who hurt us, especially those who hurt us, because that's how we break the cycle." Sarah Chen, who'd been quietly observing, raised her hand. "May I ask Robert something?" Margaret nodded. "Why did you do it?" Sarah asked. "Why did you abandon your mother when she needed you most?" Robert's voice shook. "I thought I was smarter than everyone else. Success was all that mattered. I saw Mom's house as an investment opportunity, not her home. Her illness was a timing problem, not a cry for help." He looked up, meeting the angry eyes around him. "I became the thing I swore I'd never be when Dad died. I abandoned my family for money, and I lost both." Ashley, who'd been standing by the door, moved to sit beside her father. "That's why I came to work here," she said. "I needed to understand both sides, the victims and the perpetrators, because sometimes they're the same person." Margaret watched her granddaughter, so wise for her years, so determined to heal her family's wounds. The phone rang in the distance. Life at the center continued. But in that meeting room, something shifted. The anger didn't disappear, but understanding began to take its place. "Tomorrow," Margaret announced, "Robert starts work in our maintenance department. He'll clean the rooms where we help people heal from what he did to me. That's his path to redemption." She looked at her son, really looked at him. For the first time in 20 years. "Are you ready for that?" Robert nodded, tears falling freely now. "Yes, Mom, I'm ready." Robert's first week at the Thompson Center started at 7 a.m. sharp. Dorothy assigned him to clean the support group rooms, where seniors shared stories of abandonment and betrayal. "You'll hear things," Dorothy warned him. "Stories like your mother's. You need to be ready for that." The staff watched him carefully. Clara kept her office door open whenever he cleaned nearby. Victoria Adams made surprise visits, checking on his work and the center's atmosphere. One morning, as Robert mopped the main hall, an elderly man stopped him. "I know who you are," he said. "My daughter did the same thing to me. Took everything. Left me with nothing." Robert stopped mopping, unsure what to say. "I want to know why," the man continued. "Why do children do this to their parents?" It became a pattern. Seniors would stop him, share their stories, demand explanations. Robert listened, unable to defend actions that mirrored his own. Ashley watched her father's transformation during her internship hours. "He's different," she told Margaret during their weekly lunch. "He actually listens now. Really listens." The change wasn't easy. Some staff members refused to work with him. Others watched for any sign of his old behavior. But Robert kept showing up, doing the work, facing the consequences of his choices. "Mom's running a support group," Clara told him one afternoon. "Room 204 needs cleaning. Can you handle hearing her speak?" Robert nodded. As he cleaned the windows, Margaret's voice carried through the door. She was telling their story, the airport, the betrayal, the rebuilding. "The hardest part wasn't losing my house," she told the group. "It was losing my trust in love. But that loss taught me something. Love isn't just about blood. It's about choices we make every day." Robert leaned against his mop, tears falling silently. A month into his work, a crisis hit. An elderly woman discovered her son had emptied her bank accounts. She came to the center in panic, and Robert was cleaning nearby. "I can help," he said quietly to Clara. "I know how her son did it. I can explain the legal options." Clara hesitated, then brought the idea to Margaret. They decided to let Robert join the meeting. Not as a counselor, but as a cautionary tale. "I did what your son did," Robert told the woman. "Let me tell you how to fight back." His inside knowledge of financial fraud proved valuable. He knew the tricks, the legal loopholes, the ways children manipulated their parents' trust. Soon, Clara began consulting him on similar cases. "You're not forgiven yet," she told him bluntly. "But you're making yourself useful. Ashley's internship became a bridge between father and grandmother. She'd work on reports in Margaret's office, then help Robert with his afternoon tasks. Slowly, carefully, a new family dynamic emerged. "I found Mom's old photo albums in a storage unit," Robert told Ashley one day. "The ones I packed up when I sold the house. Should I bring them back?" Margaret overheard the question from her office. 20 years of memories boxed away with her house. "Yes," she called out. "Bring them back." The albums arrived the next day. Robert had kept everything: school reports, family photos, Christmas cards. He'd stored them safely even while destroying the life they represented. "Why did you keep them?" Margaret asked, touching a photo of Robert's 5th birthday. "I told myself it was sentiment," he answered. "But really, it was guilt. I knew what I was throwing away." That evening, as the center quieted, Margaret found Robert cleaning her office. He paused at the photo on her desk, Ashley's internship headshot. "She's amazing," Margaret said. "She broke the cycle, Robert. She saw what greed did to our family and chose a different path." Robert nodded, wiping tears with his uniform sleeve. "I want to be worthy of her, of both of you." "Then keep showing up," Margaret replied. "Keep doing the work. Keep facing what you did." The phone rang. Another crisis, another family torn apart by greed. But now they had a new tool in their healing program. A man who'd walked both paths and chose to find his way back home. The first Sunday dinner happened by accident. Margaret was working late at the center when Ashley stopped by with takeout. Robert was finishing his evening cleaning shift. "Join us," Ashley said to her father. The three of them sat in Margaret's office, sharing Chinese food and careful conversation. "This could be a regular thing," Ashley suggested. Sunday dinners at Grandma's apartment. Margaret lived above the center now, in the staff housing Victoria had added during the last renovation. Her apartment was small but warm, filled with photos of her center family. Dorothy was skeptical when Margaret mentioned the dinner plan. "Are you sure you're ready for that?" But Margaret had watched Robert's progress over the past months. He'd become an essential part of the center's work, using his knowledge of financial fraud to help other families. The next Sunday, they gathered in Margaret's apartment. Ashley brought a lasagna she'd made from her other grandmother's recipe. Robert arrived early to help set the table. "This was Mom's," he said quietly, recognizing the old china Margaret had saved. "From the house. Dorothy kept some things for me," Margaret explained, "after you left." The dinner conversation was awkward at first. They stuck to safe topics: Ashley's studies, the center's programs, the weather. But as weeks passed, the conversations deepened. "I visited the old house yesterday," Robert said during one dinner. The new owners added a second story, but Mom's rose bushes are still there. Margaret remembered planting those roses, teaching Robert to prune them when he was small. Another piece of their past, living on without them. Ashley began inviting others to join their dinners. Dorothy became a regular. Clara came sometimes, bringing her famous apple pie. Even Victoria Adams joined them once, bringing expensive wine and business advice for Ashley's future career plans. "This is what healing looks like," Clara observed one evening, watching the growing family interact. "It's not perfect, but it's real." The dinners became an anchor point in their week. Robert would share insights from his work with fraud victims. Ashley would discuss her cases from her internship. Margaret would tell stories about the center's early days. One Sunday, Robert brought a guest. Nancy, his ex-wife, was visiting Boston to help Ashley plan her graduation. "I hope it's okay," he said nervously. "She wanted to meet you, Mom, to apologize for not seeing the signs sooner." Nancy and Margaret talked for hours that night, sharing their experiences of loving and losing the man Robert used to be. "He's different now," Nancy told Margaret. "Ashley was right to bring him here. This place, this work, it's changing him." The center's influence grew. Victoria proposed expanding their model statewide. Other cities wanted to replicate their programs. Margaret found herself fielding calls from senior centers across the country. "We need to document what we've built here," Victoria said during a planning meeting. "Not just the programs, but the philosophy. The idea that healing is possible, even after the worst betrayals." Ashley took on that project, interviewing staff and clients for her final internship paper. She recorded the center's history, including the painful story of its origins. "You know what I realized?" she told Margaret during one Sunday dinner. "This place isn't just about helping abandoned parents. It's about helping their children find their way back home." Robert, washing dishes nearby, paused at her words. 20 years ago, he'd abandoned his mother at an airport, choosing money over family. Now he spent his days cleaning the rooms where other families tried to heal from similar choices. "Next week is December 15th, he said quietly. 20 years since. "Since the airport," Margaret finished. "I know." Ashley looked between them. "Maybe we should do something special that day. Not to celebrate, but to mark how far we've come." Margaret touched her heart, feeling the familiar scar. "We'll have dinner," she decided, "like we do every Sunday, because that's what families do. They show up, week after week, building something new from the pieces of what was broken." The phone rang, the center's emergency line. Another family in crisis, another chance to help. But now they had something more to offer. Proof that even the deepest wounds could heal, if you did the work and showed up for each other. One Sunday dinner at a time. 1 year after Robert's return, the Thompson Center celebrated its annual Family Reunion Day. The event had grown from a small gathering to a community celebration, with hundreds of seniors and their reconciled families filling the center's halls. Margaret watched from the podium as Ashley prepared to announce their newest initiative. Her granddaughter had graduated and accepted a full-time position as the center's program director. "The Thompson Center is expanding," Ashley announced to the crowd. "Thanks to Victoria Adams Foundation, we're opening 5 new locations across the state. Every center will offer our complete program of financial protection, family counseling, and reconciliation services." Robert stood at the back of the room, no longer just the maintenance man. His work with fraud prevention had evolved into a formal program, helping seniors protect themselves from financial exploitation. "My father taught me 2 important lessons," Ashley continued. "First, how greed can destroy families. Then, more importantly, how courage and hard work can rebuild them." The audience included familiar faces. Clara, now the center's executive director. Dorothy, still Margaret's closest friend and right hand. Sarah Chen, whose reporting had helped expose elder abuse across the state. Even Councilman Morton, who'd become one of their strongest political allies. Victoria Adams took the stage next. "When I first met Margaret Thompson, she told me that family isn't just blood, it's the choices we make every day. This center proves that. Look around. Every person here has a story of loss and recovery, of bridges burned and rebuilt." Margaret thought about her own story. The airport, the betrayal, the long journey from victim to leader. Now she watched Robert counsel other families, using his past mistakes to prevent new ones. "Mom," Robert said during a quiet moment between speeches, "remember what you told me my first day here? About cleaning the rooms where people heal?" Margaret nodded. "I understand now," he continued. "Every room in this place, every person who comes through those doors, they're all part of our story. My mistake created something bigger than us." Ashley joined them, carrying the center's new training manual. She'd written it herself, incorporating 20 years of experience and lessons. "The best part," she told them, "every new center will have a Sunday dinner program, because that's where real healing happens. Around a table, sharing food and stories, rebuilding trust one meal at a time." The celebration continued into the evening. Seniors brought their families, sharing success stories. Children who'd once betrayed their parents talked about their journey back. Parents who'd lost hope spoke about finding new purpose. "Your mother's legacy is secure," Victoria told Ashley as they watched Margaret talk with a group of seniors. "The Thompson method will help families long after we're gone." Margaret overheard and smiled. Her legacy wasn't just the center or its programs. It was Ashley, choosing to serve others instead of chasing wealth. It was Robert, facing his mistakes and helping others avoid them. It was every person who walked through their doors, choosing love over money, reconciliation over resentment. The phone rang. Their crisis line never stopped, even during celebrations. Ashley answered it now, just as Margaret had for so many years. Another family in crisis, another chance to help. "You know what I've learned?" Margaret told the gathering during her closing speech. "True wealth isn't in bank accounts or real estate. It's in the connections we build, the trust we repair, the love we choose to give even after it's been rejected. She touched her heart, feeling the old familiar scar. 20 years ago, I thought I'd lost everything. Instead, I found my true purpose. We all have the power to rebuild what's broken, to create new families from old wounds, to choose love over fear. Looking out at the faces before her, Robert, Ashley, their extended center family, Margaret saw the truth of her words. The airport moment hadn't destroyed her family. It had transformed it, expanding it beyond blood to include every person who'd ever needed a home for their heart. Welcome to our family, she concluded. All of you. Let's keep building it together, one heart at a time. The center would continue growing, helping more families find their way back to each other. But for Margaret Thompson, the greatest journey was already complete. She'd found her way home, bringing her son and granddaughter with her, proving that love was stronger than betrayal, and family was whatever you chose to build from the ashes of loss. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you experienced something similar, or do you know someone who has? Let's create a community of support and understanding. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories of healing and redemption. Remember, it's never too late to rebuild what's broken. Love always finds its way home.